America, the strongest U.S. tournament in history. We are here. We are about to get the game started. I am absolutely thrilled. We're going to be here for a whole week. I'm Jennifer Shahade. I'm here with Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan.
Hi, Jen, and hello, everyone. Welcome to the first Sinquefield Cup. I'm very excited. This is the elite tournament, the strongest tournament ever held in the United States. I'm looking forward to a great event.
And now let's meet the players. First, we have Levan Aronian, the #2 ranked player in the world and a national hero in Armenia.
Absolutely. One of the great players, one of the most creative players in the world. Levan will be looking to make a statement here at this event.
And then we have Magnus Carlsen, the #1 rated player in the world, only 22 years old. Most thrilling of all, this is his last tournament before he plays for his first world championship against Anand.
Absolutely, and the strongest player in the Western world since Robert James Fischer in 1972. Great things are expected by Magnus Carlsen.
And we've got our reigning U.S. chess champion, crowned here just a few months ago in St. Louis, the super solid Kamsky.
Right, the veteran in the field, very, very tough player to beat. I'm looking for Gada to do a lot of surprising upsets in this event.
And finally, a player everybody loves to watch, Hikaru Nakamura. He actually lives in St. Louis, and you just never know what to expect from him.
Absolutely. He is the X factor in the tournament. Hikaru could go on a mercurial streak and just wipe out the field, or he could have a bad result. But one thing's for sure, always excitement in his games.
No one wants to win more than Nakamura, that's for sure. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our third commentator, Grandmaster Maurice Ashley.
Well, thanks so much, Jen. This event, this super tournament, is of the like that has not been seen in many years. In fact, I have to go back 16 years to watch Garry Kasparov playing against a machine, Deep Blue, in 1997. And before that, maybe 2 years in 1995 when Kasparov played against Anand in a world championship match. But elite tournaments like this just don't happen on U.S. soil every day. I have to pitch myself to think it's happening now. And you watch these fighters, Magnus Carlsen, young, 22 years old, the #1 player of all time, rated player that is, and then Aronian, along with Nakamura and Kamsky, all fighters, all veterans who know how to win tournaments, big tournaments, and they definitely want to put this first Sinquefield Cup as a feather in their cap. So it's going to be super exciting over the next 6 days. I'm looking forward to it. Back to you, Jen and Yas.
And I think we're getting some players sitting. You see that the place is mobbed. Yesterday
Right.
I had an autograph session, and everybody is out here to watch these players. I mean, it's impossible to even get into the room here. And the players are sitting down, cameras flashing. I mean, I personally can't wait to see the first move, because the great thing about all these players, these world-class players, is you don't even know what they're going to play in the first move.
Right.
You know, we could get E4 on any of the boards, or we could get D4, C4, Knight F3.
Exactly. Anything is possible. It's very hard to predict the openings. I saw Hikaru when he came in. Right now he smiles. These players just shake hands.
Oh, we're going to see what they play. What do you
Right.
think? Predict. Before she
E4.
moves away.
E4.
You think he's going to go for E4? Okay, but Aronian's known as a great double king pawn player.
True that, but
So-
you got to do something.
You got to pick a move. That's
You got to
true.
pick a move. And there we have
And it looks like Magnus must have played D4, C4, because Kamsky responded with Knight to F6. So we're getting the very first moves in here.
Knight F3 by Magnus on move 1. And E4, I was right.
Whoa, how'd you know? That's amazing.
No.
I would not have been able to guess that. But that being said, Nakamura has had some difficulty, Aronian, in the past year, and he lost on both sides of the Slav. So maybe switching it up and trying an E4 opening is the way to go.
Well, as we know, E4 is the most forceful opening move, with like millions of games in the database, and the white player can pretty much dictate the early course of battle. And with E4, you can really go for a straightforward, complicated position. And we do have a Ruy Lopez on the board.
Yeah, no surprises here. Aronian loves playing the martial attack, actually.
Absolutely.
So I wonder if we're going to see one of those mainline martial attacks, or if it's going to be a more offbeat line, as many players are afraid to go into those main lines.
Exactly. But there, in the martial, is where a fellow like Hikaru could really prepare deeply and intensely. So maybe he's willing to go down through some very, very mainline, well-trodden avenues. And, oh, we just had a D4. So it looks like an early D4, an anti-martial, if you will.
And I believe that actually the other two players in the tournament have played that recently. Pretty soon we're going to get that up on the board, but that D4 anti-martial move that looks like we're seeing in Nakamura Aronian was played by Carlsen against Kamsky recently.
Really?
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Kamsky did pretty well in that game, actually. He was playing with the black pieces.
Well, always when you think about these elite tournaments, you have to realize that the players have gone through enormous opening preparation as they're trying to find weaknesses and discover opportunities of play. And so if you mentioned just that they had played before the other two players, it goes to show that they are well prepared.
So let's switch over to the Nakamura game here on your examine board, so we can take a look at these moves that are coming in. So we're getting some fast and furious moves here in Nakamura Aronian. Both players obviously very well prepared at this level.
Right.
They're excellently prepared in every opening.
Okay, I'll just pulling up onto my screen.
Yep, you want to copy that over?
I think I will probably just move the pieces. Okay, so with the I have the wrong board up. I've got Carlsen Kamsky up on this one. I have to do, I believe, examine.
Yes, you want to do examine.
Examine.
So in this game, we've got Nakamura Aronian, Nakamura playing E4, and Aronian playing his patented martial attack.
I'm not seeing it on my board.
Why don't we play the opening moves?
Okay.
Just
E4.
to take a look, and because we see them up on the board.
Right.
So.
Okay, just a second. I got two. Here we
All right, so
have
here
it.
we go. Finally, yay!
Okay.
So we've got the
Martial Gambit. Let's see from step one.
Yes, let's go all the way back. All right.
How the player started.
So,
okay, we had the opening move E4. This was met by E5, Knight F3, Knight C6. Probably the oldest and most well-known opening.
Bishop E5, the Ruy Lopez.
The Ruy Lopez. A6, Morphe's defense. Bishop step back with A4. Knight F6, counterattacking the white pawn on E4. Castles. Bishop E7, the most
popular moves in chess.
Most standard place by far. Rook E1, B5, Bishop B3,
now
and
we
castles.
actually, right before castles, we actually reach a critical moment. Does Black want to play the martial attack? We know his name is Levon Aronian, so the answer is yes.
Yes.
But for those of you at home, the way you find out whether they want to play the martial is at this moment.
Exactly.
If they play D6, then obviously they're not going to play D5 because that would be a waste of time. So once they castle, there's a very high chance that they're going to follow it up with this super aggressive move, D5. Right.
Gambiting a pawn by Black is generally considered not such a good idea. In this opening, what White is trying... Oops, I clicked. What White is trying to do is build up what we call a big center. Let me see. Moving... Oops. No, that's not working. Okay. Rook E1. And there we go. B5, Bishop B3, castles. As you said, the key moment. Now, normally, White could play a move like C3 here. You see, I clicked on C3, and the board didn't change. It changed to the position. Okay, he didn't play C3. He played A4,
right,
B4.
C3 leads to those crazy lines with the marshal after D5, when White is pretty much compelled to go and take that pawn if he wants to go for something.
Right.
Instead, there are certain what we call anti-marshal lines. Marshal is so fearsome of an opening that many White players decide to avoid it altogether with moves like A4 or H3.
Which is what happened.
Exactly.
Yes. You guessed it, A4, B4. So all of these moves are very standard, thousands of Grandmaster games. Tony, good that you're here. Whenever I'm clicking and I'm trying to exam, it doesn't let me exam. What should I type in?
You have to close out that board window.
I have to close it out, yep.
And then click 1 or click 2.
Click 1 or click 2. Okay, and then this will allow me to do my exam, yes?
Right.
Okay.
You have to close it every time you examine a new board.
Okay. So we had this move A4. Just what is this fearsome martial gambit that we've been talking about? Well, that it didn't work. I'm not able to show what I want to do. A4.
So you have to use the annotation, the green and the red. There,
Yes.
those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're at the end of the game. Okay, let's go back.
Yeah, just go all the way back so we can show this from the very beginning.
Okay. And now why isn't my green and red working? Now I have to use the top. And so this is where we get the opening, what the
All right,
players
well,
have
let's
placed.
take a look and see what Grandmaster Ashley has to say about the opening right now.
Well, Jen and Yaz, this contest
What am I
between
doing
these
wrong?
players has been going on for years and years. Obviously, there has been a lot of experience between Carlsen and Kamsky, and also with Aronian and Nakamura, particularly between those players. But I'd like to just go back and show the very first game that Carlsen beat Kamsky. He was all of 14 years old when this happened, and it came as a shock. It was 8 years ago in a World Cup, and it came as a shock when he defeated the veteran Kamsky in this position in E4 opening. You see this position on the board right now, and here he played the amazing move, kind of standard knight to D5, attacking the queen, but also, of course, hanging itself to a pawn, and Kamsky took back, and after e takes D5, it was check to the black king, and after knight E7, white is down a piece. He has given away a whole knight for this, but he got an attack going with the move C4, looking to open up lines. The black king stuck in the center of the board, right here as you see, and the queen and rook lined up, and that created a vicious attack after the move B4, bishop to G5, and after F6, blocking that bishop, he played queen to H5 with check, attacking the king, and after G6, he played this great move, queen F3, beautiful retreating move, allowing his bishop to be captured, and after that, the move queen F6, attacking the rook in the corner, also putting pressure on the knight and threatening to push the pawn to D6, getting a big attack down here, maybe checkmating the king. Kamsky had to run for his life with castles, but then he dropped the rook in the corner after queen takes H8, and Carlsen was able to move on in this game and win and tell the whole world, yes, I'm 14, but I am coming. And this was one of the great signs that Carlsen was going to be the phenom that he is today. Will Kamsky be able to fight back? Well, he managed to not lose another game against Carlsen with the black pieces ever since that fateful day. So Kamsky's feeling quite confident with himself. So we'll see if he can keep up the fight against the phenom, Magnus Carlsen. Jen Yas?
Great throwback, Maurice. And in fact, in that mini match,
Yes.
Kamsky went on to win the next game, return the favor with a slashing win of his own on the Sicilian.
Right, and then won it in overtime. But that first game that Gada Kamsky lost, that was a real serious wake-up call, and it really trumpeted the staging of Magnus Carlsen to world's number one. We have on our screen the position that Hikaru Nakamura did not want to allow the Marshall Gambit, and I wanted to show our viewers what that was. Marshall Gambit usually starts after the move C3, and after the move D5, there's a trade of pawns in the center, but notice that this black pawn on E5 has been left unprotected. And there is a long, complicated body of theory that goes like this, and this is what leads to some of the most complicated positions in chess theory. And Hikaru wanted no part of that, and that was why he used that anti-Marshall Gambit line that we're about to see.
Although many people do take the pawn. In fact, one of the funnest games we commented on the U.S. Championship was in a line where white took the pawn and lived to tell the tale, won a brilliant game.
John Bryant versus Gregory
That's
Kaidanov.
right.
I
You
remember
guys
it well.
check that out. But Aronian is just considered the foremost expert in this opening, so lots of players avoided against him.
With good reason.
Yeah.
Okay, A4, the anti-martial, D4, D6, the players. This was an interesting decision by Hikaru. So Hikaru went for an immediate and early queen. Oh, he didn't trade queens. There is a line here that instead of knight D2, white, if he wants, can go for what is considered a slight pull in this ending. It isn't that much, but players tend to prefer white in this ending.
No, I'm not that surprised that Nakamura, our really brilliant dynamic attacking player, didn't go for that early trade of queens, but instead played knight to D2, keeping a lot of tension in the position.
Right, and Levon has responded with, let's see what he did, knight F6, D7.
Well, before we get more into this game, let's go back to our Carlsen-Kamsky battle and see if Carlsen comes up with anything slashing against Kamsky. As Grandmaster Ashley pointed out, we have seen Kamsky, considering his rating differential, do very well against Carlsen.
Absolutely. He's an extraordinarily solid player. By that, what I mean to say is he was really trained in his classics. He plays in the center, develops his pieces on sound squares, wants a safe king, and he's not the excessive risk taker unless he's forced to do so. Let's see what happened from the early stages. This is the Slav defense. Magnus opening up with knight F3.
So that's just kind of a move order type thing. A lot of times it transposes directly into positions that would result after C4 or D4 immediately.
Well, exactly. However, we know that Kamsky loves the Grunfeld defense.
Right.
So you could just see that Magnus wanted a particular move order to avoid mainline Grunfelds.
Oh yeah, I used to play the Grunfeld, and it would be so irritating when my opponent played knight F3 and C4 because there's really only inferior versions of the Grunfeld once you do that.
Right, you don't get the pure Grunfeld.
Yeah.
And so he provoked Gata into a second line of defense, which is the Slav defense. So I'm sure Gata felt comfortable at this moment, that maybe a little bit miffed that he didn't get a chance to play his beloved Grunfeld. And we have a standard Slav, and then this A7, A6, the Cherbolinsk variation. I'm sure my Russian pronunciation is horrible.
Now, somebody who doesn't play a lot of Slavs or see a lot of Slavs, this A6 move looks so bizarre. You know, you're making another non-developing move so early in the game, but as we've seen again and again, it's around to stay. A few years ago, maybe people would think it's a little bit of a fad, but it's sticking around, this A6 move. Why do you think it has such staying power?
That's true. Well, one of the ideas behind the move A7, A6, let's face it, is black is interested in capturing this pawn on C4 and protecting it thereafter with B5, or sometimes simply playing the move B5. So you're right, it's one of those things where you're losing tempo in terms of not developing a piece, but on the other hand, it has very, very useful properties in the position by controlling the square B5. After A6, E3, so Magnus just simply reinforces the protection of the C4 pawn, bishop F5, bishop D3, offering a trade of bishops. Gata accepted the trade.
One of the funniest little points of having that pawn on A6 is occasionally, against a frontal attack on the pawn, you can play a rook A7 type move.
Exactly. This queen B3 kind of business, rook A7. It looks funny, but it's been played. E7, E6. So I think we're catching up to the players. Castles, bishop B4, and I believe this was the last move. Let me just go over to our board over here, and let's see. No, another move has been played. After bishop B4. So the idea behind this move, bishop B4, is to control the E4 square, so that in the future, black will be able to bring his knight to this very nice square, great central outpost on e4.
And so that we can't play e4, because if we were to play e4 here, you could take on c3 and then take the pawn on e4.
Winning a pawn.
And
Absolutely.
That's definitely one of the ideas for white in this position, to try to make something out of his space edge. So
is to get that advanced pawn, to advance the e4 pawn. So after bishop b4, bishop d2 has been played, and now it's Gada Kamsky to play. If I were Gada, I would probably castle here. And even though it's still the early stages, I would say that Gada has in fact won the opening battle, in the sense that he has a very solid position without any particular pressure being placed on him at this moment.
now, are you worried at all about knight takes d5 here?
Perhaps I should be. I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Knight takes d5 with a surprise, a discovered attack, what we say, against the bishop on b4.
Always looking
Knight.
for loose pieces is really important, but let's just show what happens if you play bishop takes d2.
Okay,
We
for
can
sure.
get our important little tactical in-between move.
Absolutely. So knight takes d5. A mistake from black's point of view would be to take the bishop, because it looks like, hey, I'm a piece up, and this knight on d5 is about to be captured. But white has our famous German word,
Zwischenzug.
the Zwischenzug. That's right.
Yeah, I gotta get it right, because sometimes people get mad at me for saying in-between move. They said, that's not right, it's a Zwischenzug.
A Zwischenzug.
And of course the two are synonymous.
Right.
But after knight takes f6 check, now queen takes f6, when we recapture the bishop, we're up a pawn.
Right. Notice that the position, there's a black pawn missing on d5. A moment ago there was a black pawn, now there isn't. Thanks to that Zwischenzug, white would win a pawn.
But instead, of course, as Yasser immediately pointed out, black can recapture on d5. And the idea was that if you recapture with a pawn, you're gonna lose that piece on b4. But
Right.
instead, recapture with a knight.
Right. Don't allow that kind of capture, but after knight takes d5, recapture with the knight, which in this case the knight protects the bishop. After pawn takes d5, pardon me, bishop takes d2, after queen takes d2, all that's really happened is there's been a lot of trades. And
Carlsen does not want this. No
yeah,
way.
there's just not too much life in this particular position. And I would say that this is something that Magnus would shy away from.
Oh, absolutely. The highest rated player in history, the #1 player in the world. He's #1 in the world. Kamsky's number 19. And Carlsen has the white pieces. So,
Right.
of course, a draw is a possible result, but it's something that he would not be thrilled with going into the game.
Precisely.
He wants to push. That's the idea. You get the white pieces. It's only 6 games in this tournament.
Right.
So you can't really chill out too much.
No,
You need
even-
to try to take the wins where you can get them. And here he is, his only white against the lowest rated player in the tournament.
Right, so he's got to really crank up the pressure. Now, exactly how white might do that is not so easy. One consideration that Magnus might have is to pop his knight out, right out here in the center of the board. Now, the idea behind this is that in case of knight d7, he might want to play f4, hoping for an expansion on the king side. They're double-edged. This is double-edged. It's not 100%, because as you mentioned earlier, there is the possibility that black will get a very powerful knight on e4.
Well, definitely going to be an intriguing battle. And let's go back to Grandmaster Ashley for more on Nakamura-Aronian and their history.
Thanks, Jen. Well, Nakamura, of course, is known as a fighting chess player. His games are full of fire, desire, and brimstone everywhere you look. That's why his style is so beloved. But Aronian is also a very strong player himself and is willing to go into fighting chess. And just this year, they battled in the Tata Steel tournament, which is, of course, the most elite tournament of the year, at least at the top of the year, to start the whole year going. And they played a great game, and Aronian got into this position against Nakamura. As you can see, he has a vicious passed pawn on the c3 square going down the board, and he played a move that the computers thought, no way, this is not the best move, but it resulted in a spectacular finish. The move pawn to e5, attacking the bishop in the middle of the board, and after this capture, he took back on b5, and after takes, he then continued without recapturing the move d4, giving himself 2 connected pass pawns. And this just rattled Nakamura to no end. These vicious pawns threatening to march down the board and become queens. And the game ended pretty quickly after that. Rook to d1, rook takes b5, and he couldn't capture the pawn on d4 because of problems on the back row. So he tried to slow these pawns down. And in this position, he could have simply captured here and had 3 connected pass pawns, but Aronian got excited and played the move d3, and after rook takes, he came down the board with rook to b1 check, bishop to c1, and then he played this bold move, rook to b2. As you can see, the bishop cannot capture because the rook is pinning it to the king, and the rook on c2 was stuck. All sorts of problems as this rook is trapped, and you can't capture either because the pawn would come down even further, attacking the bishop. So he had to give away the exchange here, and Aronian continued rook d2. This can't be captured. Again, the vicious pin on the back row, and this rook is going to come down to d1. Desperation time for Nakamura. He threw in a couple of checks, and after king to e6, decided to take here, and he was just in trouble. Nothing really to do. If he had moved his king over, then rook takes this pawn, and he's still getting backdoored. So he just gave up the bishop with king to g1, and after rook d1 check, king to h2, there Aronian was able to go up a whole rook, a few more moves, but it was technically very easy for him to finish off the game. So Aronian must have this memory in the back of his head, but so does Nakamura. He doesn't want to lose again with the white pieces to someone he's beaten 3 times, but he's lost to 5 times. So they have a good rivalry going here. So expect some blood to happen today. Guys?
Yeah, I like Maurice's description there of that game. I mean, Aronian has been having fun with Nakamura lately. He also won on the white side of the Slav recently in the Town Memorial.
Exactly. Well,
so now we've got an e4 opening.
Right.
A good change of pace.
For sure. And in January, where that Tata Steel game was played in Vaikanze, I was there for that game. It was pretty an intense game, and a great victory by Livon. In today's game, this was the position that we had reached from the opening. Again, this has been very standard play. We've seen a lot of games from this position, but at the same time, I noticed that the players are playing pretty quickly. Livon is maybe a little bit behind on the clock, nothing special, and he's played this intriguing move, knight f6 d7. Looks like he's having a little trouble with his development. After knight d7 came knight d4, which makes a lot of sense. You want to jump to the f5 square.
Or play f4, knight c6.
And shockingly for me, Livon played c7, c5, just giving up this f5 square, giving up the d5 square. That's a very bold move. Strategically,
Oppositionally, it seems like you're having some kind of visceral response. Like,
yeah.
Square.
Well, there's a lot of light squares that move does give up. For example, White could go spank with bishop d5, putting his bishop in the middle of the board, probably provoking the rook to move, knight f5. And then what we see, why I was stunned by Livon's decision, is because White has these dominating minor pieces on the light squares. However,
let's try to get rid of them with knight f6
or knight d6.
Also hitting that knight on f5. We'd
Exactly.
love to snap that off with the bishop.
Precisely. And at the same time, this bishop would be under attack. So maybe my initial reaction to the move c5 was a little too strong, that perhaps this move isn't as bad as it looks visually. And after c5, maybe we should jump right away with knight f5.
Well, still, I think we're going to see Aronian think about moving that knight on d7 to put the question rather, to the knight on f5.
You mean knight d6 so that you could play bishop takes f5 in the near future type of thing?
Yes, and potentially c4 as well.
Okay. And you had mentioned a moment ago the idea of playing f4. How about something like this? I'll capture the bishop, and as we both know, it's nice to have the advantage of the 2 bishops. So that's a plus for Hikaru.
I thought you were going to say that it's nice to know what your opponent's going to play in the next move.
Well, that's nice. That's also nice to know. Then you have a move like a5, attacking this knight. The knight's forced to drop back. And
yeah,
now,
moves like the in-between move c4 doesn't seem to lead to much because you take on b6 and we take on b3. So knight d7 seems totally forced.
right,
And now you want to stick the bishop on the square, d5.
right, once again attacking the rook, provoking it to move. And again, you had mentioned a moment ago how white wants to play this move f4, expand on the king side, attacking this knight on e5, booting the knight, as we say in chess, just getting that knight off that central square, putting it on a less powerful square, knight g6.
And now knight c4 is what you want, huh?
Right, and that's the light square domination that I was looking for a moment ago that I misplayed.
And you even have a little tactical threat here.
Knight-
Snap up that little pawn.
Well,
Let's just play a random move for black.
Knight f6, for example. And as you mentioned, there's a tactic in the position. Knight takes d6, seemingly losing a knight for free, but then this powerful discover check wins, wins
That's
the
what we
queen.
want. Not going to happen with players of this caliber, but it's going to happen again and again in our analysis.
Absolutely.
So we love to show you the little tricks that are hidden in the brilliant moves that these people actually play. There's so many little tactics and ideas behind that.
Absolutely.
And now let's go to Maurice.
Jen and Yaz, I just wanted to say that Levon's last move, c5, just looks like a shocker. Yaz, you've been pointing out a great line for Nakamura in this position, and giving up all those light squares, to my eyes, my humble eyes, looks just horrible. I mean, why would you play a move like c5? Now, of course, the guy happens to be like 400 rating points higher than I am, so who am I to talk? But I think even you, Yaz, have to be really surprised by this last move, c5, giving up all those light squares, giving white the chance to go to f5, as you mentioned, get rid of the bishop, the weak pawn on d6. I think this is a moment when most grandmasters would be befuddled by his decision, but he is the number 2 player in the world. So we're going to have to see if this is something that he prepared, or maybe it was just impromptu and Nakamura is going to punish him. Guys?
Well, I'm glad to see Nakamura trying an e4 opening because it does look like he's getting a little more than he did when he played d4. And on top of that, it's exciting for us.
Absolutely. And again, I think that e4 is well suited to Hikaru's style against this particular player. Levon is a very, very well prepared player, and he's one of the most creative players in the world. Strategically, he comes up with all kinds of ideas and all kinds of openings. So you want to reduce Levon's options, and e4 being a much more forcing lines of play. That's why I like Hikaru's choice. Now, what Maurice was just saying is right on the button. There aren't many choices here for Levon. Either his position's terrible, just terrible after c5, or he's really prepared some hidden ideas that we haven't quite come to terms with yet.
So it's either terrible or okay, but no matter what,
Right.
Nakamura's position is never bad.
No,
So that's the
exactly.
thing
Just
that,
how
like-
good or how better is Hikaru's position at the moment.
Well, you guys should chime in as well. We do have our Twitter hashtag Sinquecup,
Yes.
SINQCUP. We're not making you spell out the whole Sinquefield. So if you've got any questions or comments, please tweet at us. And if they're really good, you might hear yourself on the air.
Right.
We've also got questions at stlouischessclub.org. So we'd
Wonderful.
love to hear from you guys and hope you'll stay with us all week. Now, on a personal note, one of the things that many of the members here at the Chess Club were, instantly impressed with is Levon Aronian's personality. He's number 2 chess player in the world, but you would never know that from his attitude. He just will come up to pretty much anyone and start talking to them about the game.
He's very gregarious, very open, good-natured,
Yeah.
the terrific conversationalist. Did you notice how good his English is?
Oh, fantastic English, a great
Wow.
conversationalist.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, he's really an A-type personality. He's really open and friendly. I just have to point out Hikaru's at the board, his demeanor at the board. Of the 4 players who playing in this tournament, he is the worst poker player face. I mean,
the worst poker face.
The worst poker face.
Maybe not the worst poker player.
That's true.
He has played in the World Series of Poker before, but the worst poker face indeed. But you know what? He takes after Kasparov, and I absolutely love it because it gives us, something to look at, like kind of a barometer of his position.
True, a wonderful insight into how he's feeling. Like you see, there's kind of tossing some variations back and forth, and it's not like he's very pleased. In the background, we have Magnus, and Magnus is just stoically just sitting at the board in deep concentration. He's not revealing himself at all. And Hikaru is kind of back and forth in his seat, Levon walking around, very familiar pose. Gada is the stoic player at the board. He just has tremendous assist flies.
Although sometimes he puts his face in his hands, regardless of his position. He can even have a good position, and you'll see him covering his entire face.
Sometimes he does tense up, but most of the time he tries to sit there as clear, level-headed as possible.
Balletic posture, yeah, that's always a plus. And well,
that's a very familiar pose for Gada. For me, I played Gada lots and lots of times, and that's what I'm used to. Magnus actually does some slouching. Sometimes he leans back in his seat and he just kind of like puts his hand up and he kind of looks and looks like as if he was watching a football game from his couch.
Oh, well, we actually took Magnus to his very first NFL football game yesterday.
Wasn't that great?
He did have a good time. And
St. Louis Rams in a thriller.
And he had a little bit of a treat in that Grandmaster Ashley taught him all of the rules. So.
Well, you got to start sometime. And he got a souvenir football because he goes down on the pitch. And the NFL gave him a football, and he was cuddling that thing. Boy, he held on to it. He wanted to keep his American football.
And I think Grandmaster Ashley has a couple of comments about that.
All right.
Well, it was a lot of fun actually teaching the young phenom all the nuances of American football. You know, when he says football, he means soccer. When we were at the game, we had very nice seats in the skybox in Rex Sinquefield skybox, and he was intrigued by the game. At first, he was sort of laid back, and then he started getting into it. He would do a lot of things, like he started banging on the railing in front of us, and we were making lots of noise as the Rams were coming back. The game went back and forth. He even was into the rules, anticipating rules. Even when I told him about the challenge rule, you throw a red flag on the field, and I said, this is what you could do. He said, and if you get it wrong, do you lose a timeout? I think, how'd you guess that? I figured somebody must have taught him before, but he was already deeply into it. He loved the game. The game, of course, was very dramatic, ending in the last minute with a field goal. And it seems like we might have converted the world's #1 player into a football fan, maybe even a Rams fan, as a matter of fact. Guys?
Thank you, Maurice. I loved Magnus's attitude. When it looked like the Rams were going to lose, he says, I don't really care who wins. But then when they won, he was screaming and high-fiving. That's the way it should be as a sports fan. You're really happy if they win, and if they don't, then, it's all good. Still the best chess player in the world.
No, I cry when the Dallas Cowboys lose. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Dallas is America's #1 team.
With more insight into the personalities, we've got a little video treat for you guys.
All right.
My name is Gada Kamsky. I'm from New York City. I'm the current U.S. chess champion.
I'm Hikaru Nakamura. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm the #1 ranked chess player in the U.S.
I'm Levon Aronyan. I'm from Armenia, and I'm #2 ranked player in the world.
I'm Magnus Carlsen. I'm from Norway, and I'm ranked as #1 in the world.
Wonderful.
We're trying to promote our game, so I think everybody knows that it's the first tournament of such kind in the United States for a long time. So I think everybody is going to do their best. Everybody is going to try to entertain the public and play combative chess.
And it's very prestigious, and of course it's the honor of the United States at stake, so we have to perform well.
So the popularity of chess in certain places is very high, but for me it's all about America. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like there's the level of popularity at the moment, and I'm just hoping that whether it's me, whether it's Kamsky, whether it's players like Carlsen or Aronian, that in some way we can raise the profile.
I think chess has the appeal of something interesting, something deep, and that's our advantage, and I think that's going to attract people of America.
It's really quite nice to see that there is an elite tournament here.
And again, this tournament is the first among many firsts that the organizers created here in St. Louis. The St. Louis is the chess capital of the US. It's only fitting that you guys have here the best tournament.
Actually, I can call myself a representative of the capital of chess, Yerevan, because we have so many clubs and so many people. But I feel tension because I feel that the city of St. Louis is slowly trying to compete with us.
I know that the US Championship has been here for a few years. I've been following it online, both the games and the commentary, and I've heard only positive things about it, and that's part of the reason why I was eager to come here myself.
I think I would have to say that I'm looking forward to playing Carlsen the most. We've played many times before. Most people know I don't have a good score against him, so it's a chance to kind of change things, and I'm just going to do my best.
Yeah, I played Kamsky twice in the World Cup, 2005, 2007. He's extremely tough, fights till the end every time, and I think I have some of the same qualities, and that's why our games are usually quite interesting.
Every player in the world has a unique style, and Levon is one of the most original players you can ever meet. His understanding of chess, his personality, they're all very unique.
I think my usual something adventurous on the borders of something crazy.
Obviously, I enter every tournament with a mindset that if everything goes according to plan, I should have a very good chance of winning.
I'm going to do really well. That's what I feel, but I don't know how well.
I just only play for honor, for glory, and for chess, for the sake of chess.
It will definitely not be easy, and I look forward to it.
We all know each other for many years now, played each other so many games. So it will be intense, it will be interesting, and hopefully the fans will be glad.
And welcome back. We've got an empty board, but there is no result. The players, as they tend to do in this high-level chess competition, they pace around, think of the moves in their head.
Yes, and also grab some refreshments. They have a back room there. I think we just see Magnus coming out, where they can get refreshments and something to eat. And just happened that both players were absent. When we left it, there was a game between Magnus and Gada Kamsky. We had seen this move, bishop d2. We considered the trade of bishop for knight, and that happened right away. I actually thought Gata was going to castle. He captured the knight at once. Bishop recaptured, and he castled now. After castles, we are at the end of the current position. No, another move has been played.
It looks like
A4.
Carlsen has played A4. So maybe trying to get some kind of queenside initiative going with b4 and rook b1. That's the kind of thing you like, Yasser.
I do. In this particular case, I was just wondering in what move order Magnus might want to expand on the queen side. And I didn't know if a4 was the most accurate. The reason I thought that a4 may not have been the most accurate was because after a4, it does give black the opportunity for a5, just slowing white down a little bit on the queen side. And that was why I was thinking was maybe b4 would have been more accurate. b4 and only after, in that case, after say knight d7, a4. And I do like this expansion on the queen side.
Well, for some reason or the other, Kamsky did not play a5.
Exactly.
There was some variation he didn't like there, but he instead just castled, right?
Right. After a4, He
played knight bd7 rather.
Right. Knight bd7 instead of the move a5, which I thought was actually a pretty good move. And then Magnus has just gained some space on the queen side. This is nothing earth-shattering or anything like that, but Magnus has a little bit more play on the queen side than Black has in the center. But again, I'm expecting that Gata will take this opportunity to plant his knight firmly on this excellent outpost in the middle of the board.
Now, do you think Magnus will allow knight takes e3, or do you think he's going to move the bishop to, say, e1 and prevent that trade?
He probably wants to keep his bishop, if you will. Yeah, bishop b4, that type of thing. And then after rook e8, now he wants to figure out how he's going to kick this knight away. He's going to have to move his knight on f3 in order that he could play f3 and then potentially e4 and explode in the center.
Without allowing more trades, because I mean you could play something like knight d2, but the more trades that occur, it's going to be harder to really squeeze something out of this position, right? So you're predicting something like knight e1 instead?
Right, something like that. I think there will be some build-up first, some preparatory moves.
Yeah, to get the
like
rook
d1.
Looks awkward to put the knight on e1 with the rook still on f1. Yeah.
Precisely. Just make a few more building moves before we pop back with a knight e1 and f3 type of ideas. Very, very tough to get something significant going here. It's going to be a grinding kind of a game, a trench warfare type of game, if you will.
Well, it would be very instructive, because one of the things that is hardest for amateur players is a slow build-up. They always want to do stuff, you know?
Me too.
They want to play, like, but you're such a fantastic strategist. But
yeah.
You want to do stuff, but you make yourself wait. Is that
exactly.
What it is?
It's like sort of like centers in NBA. They think they're guards, and guards think they're centers. So you're right. You know, I'm the strategist, but I really do like attacking as well.
Strategist, yeah. Strategian is tactician is the one, yeah. But it'll be interesting, for instance, Black, and one of the reasons it's hard to play this type of position for Black, when I look at this position as Black, I'm like, how do I play c5 or e5? I want to do something.
Right.
But, of course, one of the important things in this position is not to do too much and, you know, create open lines for the bishop.
Exactly. Just keep the position. Keep it solid. I think Maurice might have had something to share.
Yes, indeed. You look at a game like this, and it's the kind of position, Yas, that frankly I would almost fall asleep on, because I'm the kind of player who wants to see action. I want to see some open lines. I want to see some aggressive play. But this kind of position is much more nuanced, much more subtle, and much more slow. But Carlsen has grown over the years into a player who seems to be able to win from any position. He is so calm and patient that he wins positions that look dead even, that just look like there's nothing here, but he'll play for 50, 60, 70 moves, and with his stamina and with his keen eye, and also, of course, with his incredible endgame technique, he's able to win these kinds of positions. So just because it looks like a quiet position doesn't mean that it's going to end up in a quiet result. Now, Kamsky has always given Carlsen trouble. I think he's been trying to punish him ever since that first win that Carlsen shocked him with when he was 14 years old. In fact, Kamsky has a plus score on Carlsen in their matchups. And in a game with Black, we saw in the interview with Carlsen, he mentioned playing Kamsky in the World Cup. Well, in this game, Kamsky played in 2005, that same tournament where he lost to Carlsen in that game. They got to this position, and Carlsen found out that he was in big trouble. Even though he was up a pawn, this pawn on f2 was just too powerful for him to manage. In fact, if he had tried to queen his own pawn now by pushing, then rook takes c2 check, and after the king blocks, then knight to g3 check, and there's nothing to do about suddenly a queen appearing on the board, and you're going to get quickly checkmated. So instead, Carlsen in this position after rook to c3 dropped his knight back to d2, but that didn't help at all after rook takes on c2, rook to d4 trying to defend, and then knight takes d2, and he realized he couldn't take back in this position because of rook takes, and again, a queen would appear on the board. So he quickly lost his game after going down a piece. He played one check and king e6, and then he resigned because he couldn't stop this pawn from becoming a queen. Too many threats with his rook under attack. So Kamsky has been a very difficult opponent for Carlsen. We can't overstate that case because, as you see now, he's decided to stay super quiet, not cause any trouble, and try to steer the games into more solid lines where maybe his now experienced self, at 22 can outplay his veteran opponent. Guys?
Absolutely, Maurice. I mean, you do make a good point about overstating the case in that, you know, Carlsen and Kamsky haven't played that much in recent years. A lot of their games were from when the ratings were more equal.
Exactly.
And that's because Kamsky, he's a fantastic player, but he sometimes doesn't get those, you know, absolutely plum invitations to things like the London Chess Classic or the Town Memorial that Nakamura is usually getting invited to.
Exactly.
And I think that's why you see Nakamura has a really bad score against Carlsen. Kamsky, a lot better. And they actually intersected in a really crucial historical moment for Kamsky. I mean, really what signaled his massive comeback, winning the 2007 World Cup.
That's right.
He beat Carlsen there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they actually had exactly the same rating. Of course, now we see that there's been some divergence.
Exactly.
And,
Magnus keeps going up and up and up.
Magnus has broken the record, one of the only players ever to make 2,800 and then go on to, you know, beat Gary's record.
Exactly. Maurice is explaining, and that was a bit of a surprise to me, that of every player in the field, Gata has a plus record with Magnus. And I must say, there's some psychological advantage to having a plus record against one of your opponents. It's sort of like you have this history and you get to say, well, I've actually defeated you in the past, and I'm used to that feeling. And conversely, when you have an opponent that you do badly against, you're a little bit shy. You can't help but feel that, okay, I don't want to lose again type of thing.
Absolutely, and even when Carlsen was the highest rated player, you know, they played a couple of very, very tough draws where Kamsky had the black piece and was able to neutralize Magnus.
Right.
You know, in Tata Steel, you know.
Case in point, yes.
Yeah, Kamsky had the upper hand with the black pieces in one of these games. So it does seem that part of it is that they haven't played that much when Magnus skyrocketed, but also part of it is that Gata's style seems to match up well against Carlsen's.
And you have that, of course, in chess, these wonderful stylistic matchups. And sometimes against a certain opponent, you really, really do very well because you like the type of positions they are willing to give you. And sometimes you just don't match up very well because your opponent's not giving you the opportunities you want. In the game between Magnus and Gata, they had reached this position. We did see this move, bishop b4, the move that Magnus in fact played. Gata quickly, obviously this rook on f8 under attack, slid his rook to the e8 square, and Magnus has been thinking ever since. So they've got this position, not too much going on, but at some point, if White's going to get any kind of advantage, he's going to have to get rid of that big knight sitting on this e4 square. And it's just not clear to me how he's going to get rid of it. It's as long as it stays there on e4, Black's game is just simply going to be excellent. And we had mentioned this move rook d1 as a possibility. And I'm thinking that one of the things that Gata might consider is a move like f5. That just reinforces the knight. And if we were to see just a few more moves, rook c1, queen f6, finally Black's queen makes an appearance in the game. Black connects his two rooks so that they are now mutually protective. And at this point in the game, you just have to sit there and say, gosh, Black's position looks simply fine. I don't see any reason that White could even make a pretense of an advantage.
Yeah, and moves like knight e1, you know, even Black can sometimes invade and play something like queen h4 and put a little bit of pressure on the position. So. Right,
you've got to be careful about a move like queen h4.
Forcing, I mean, White can certainly defend,
sure.
But again, the position looks pretty solid here for Black.
Right, if you think in terms of a Dutch stone wall, well, Black's done everything right in terms of getting the stone wall position, and he's managed to trade off his light squared bishop. So I don't see any disadvantages in this particular position for Gata.
But you would still prefer to take Carlsen's position, right? If you had to choose? Nope. You would it would just be you just flip a coin?
It's a toss.
You flip a coin, all right.
It's a toss.
Interesting.
For me. Other people have different ideas, but it would be a toss.
All right, well, let's take a look at our Nakamura Aronian game and see how that's going. We mentioned that we liked Nakamura's E4 move in the position, the starting position, just because he had so much trouble with Aronian Slav in the past.
Exactly. And the players, I think, as Hikaru made a move since we saw the move C5. Hikaru's up from the board, so let us see. Has he played knight f5? The move we've been expecting is knight f5. And we expected this for a long time. I'm not too sure why Hikaru took such a great amount of time over this move.
And he did play knight to f5.
He did
have
play
that
knight
move
f5.
in.
Okay. And so we got this position, and once again, just recalling what we spoke about, this move knight f6. The idea, as you mentioned, was just to be able to capture this knight on f5 and develop the piece. We had a move like knight takes, queen takes on the board, and we were looking at a position with f4. Starts to get very sharp very quickly. I can see a lot of tactics occurring from a position like this.
Oh yeah, because f4 is always a really double-edged move. We're pushing back, but we're also severely weakening our own king. Especially when we move our rook over to e1. We don't even have much coverage for the f4 pawn. So
exactly.
The question is, we're going to be piling up on d6. Are you going to defend it, or are you going to try to just counterattack perhaps on e4?
Right.
Because once you put your bishop on b7, if we do push our pawn forward, even more lines are opening up against white's king.
Right.
So it become pretty wild.
It could be very wild. I was trying to provoke black into the following line of play after the move f4 was bishop to g4. Notice that white's queen is a bit hemmed in here, and after, for example, a move like knight f3, I actually think that the end result of this line of play is favorable for white. Even though white has doubled f-pawns in the position, that extra pawn on f3 does reinforce the center.
I thought you wanted to go for the 3 pieces. No?
The 3 pieces? What's the 3 pieces?
I thought you were trying to do the
this routine?
E5.
Ooh, I didn't want to go, no, I didn't want to do this.
Too many pawns?
Well, I just think the queen is too dominating in this specific...
Normally, if the pieces can get anchored properly, they tend to be superior to the queen.
Exactly.
But that being said, we've given up 1 pawn for the honor as well. So that's a bit of a problem, and our coordination is not complete. So here you're taking the queen?
You hear I'm taking the queen. I like what you're saying about the 3 pieces. The 3 pieces more than compensating for the queen. But in this particular case, after a move like queen d4 check, that queen in the center of the board really looks pretty dominant to me. I wouldn't jump to this position if I were white.
Problem is, like mathematically, we don't mind the fact that we're down supposedly a point.
A material.
What we mind is that our pieces are not coordinated.
Exactly.
And that happens sometimes in the Ruy Lopez because white's development's a little bit luxurious.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we knew we were gonna get into this wild position, our bishop on c1 would already be developed.
Right. So, no, if you put the bishop on c1 on a good square like f4 or g3, I think I'd flip and I'd say I prefer white's position.
Great point. Yeah, like if we could only make the move bishop c1 to f4 here.
Yeah, exactly. With these pieces still on their original squares, I think this is too much development for black.
Yeah, we can't. It just seems like we can't really untangle. It's just a little bit of a.
But going back to this line,
instead knight f3 here. Okay.
I do like knight f3, and here it's funny. We're told that double pawns are weak and so forth and so on. This is a case that contradicts that general rule. Here the double pawns are actually very nice as far as attacking. And then after, for example, a move like bishop h3, king h1, if you notice there's a half-open g-file here, and it's clear that white will seek to one day bring his rook over to g1. And this is the type of position I think that both players enjoy. Wild situations with opportunities for both players. But I think Hikaru will prefer white's position. I prefer white's position here.
Yeah, it's a little bit more tricky to figure out what black wants to do. Does black want to try to play for d5, c4? It requires more creativity, but that's certainly up Levon's area.
Yeah, and surprising to me, after the move knight f5, knight f6 was played by Levon. We did anticipate that move, and we didn't anticipate this move by Hikaru Nakamura. He dropped back with his knight on e3, so he's losing a lot of time, and he didn't capture this bishop, which I think I would have snapped off the board rather instantly.
Okay, so a little bit of a long-winded maneuver, knight g1 to f3 to d4 to f5 to e3. And here we are.
That's pretty long-winded. Just your saying it sounded like it was a long-winded. So quite a journey by White's knight. It's cost him a lot of development. But let us try to fathom why Hikaru chose to play the move knight e3. Well, now that this pawn is on c5, the square d5 is going to be a perpetual outpost. So, for example, if black were to play a move like a5, this square d5 is a fantastic outpost for White's knight one day. Here there would just simply be a trade of knights. So that's the long-term idea of Hikaru's, is to, in the future, occupy some of these light squares that were weakened by that move c5. A move by both Maurice and I looked at it and said, whoa, wait a minute. Maurice may have some insights on this position as well.
Well, Yaz, looking at this position, I got to say, I really don't like the move knight e3. I mean, I'm looking at it, I would agree with you. Knight takes e7 look natural. But something we have seen before is Nakamura tried to avoid Aronian's preparation. Aronian is known to be great in his preparation. He's fantastic. He used to not be so great, but he was interviewed years ago talking about how Kramnik really put it to him about making sure he was well prepared in games. And probably, my opinion, Kamsky looked at this and said, no way this guy's playing the move c5, weakening all those light squares and giving me a chance to get the two bishops in a move like f4 without being well prepared and having some tricks up his sleeve. So maybe I don't go down that main line. Maybe I just back up and play a real solid move like knight e3 and force Aronian to think. And if you just checked Aronian's body language, before he looked really calm, no real issues in his face. Body-wise, he just seems real comfortable. But now looking at him at the board, it looks like this particular move, knight e3, is new for him, and he looks like it's time to work. He never looked at this move. I don't think he's afraid of it, but he seems as though this is something that he's had to think about. He must be thinking, though, that it's equal, and it looked like he has played a move, bishop to b7, in response, and now the move f3, Nakamura going super solid in the position, and it looks like this is what's happened. Avoid all the big-time preparation and just get into a solid position and play from here. Back to you guys.
Well, I still like Nakamura's position.
Yes, Hikaru has a pull, but I'm wondering how significant that pull is. In other words, you mentioned what a great journey that knight took, and all of those moves that the knight took to land on e3 square, has it been worth it? Without too much trouble or thought, I meant to say, Levon played bishop b7, attacking the pawn on e4, and Hikaru answered very quickly, f2, f3, fortifying his pawn in the center. And now the big question is, can we play e4?
We'd like to play d5
d5,
to
try
to
attacking.
blast open the position, but I think the problem is that hanging knight on e5 is a bit of an issue.
Exactly.
And so our rook on e1 is perfectly poised here, and we would just end up capturing it here.
Exactly. So this move, the move that black wants to play, that equalizing move d6, d5, can't be made immediately because, as you point out, the knight hangs.
It's funny how in black's most popular openings, the Sicilian and double king pawn, this move d5 is so crucial. If we get it ungracefully, it usually means our position it's fine, if not better sometimes. Right,
it's the great equalizing move. So I'm thinking that what Levon will play is a move like queen c7. Okay, so in a kind of an X-ray kind of motion, the queen on c7 will support the knight. Then what Levon wants to do is slide his rook over so he can make that break d6, d5 possible. And should it all work out for him, no problem, equality.
The big question now is what we're going to do with our knight on d2. Are we going to try to stick it on c4, or are we going to try to do another long-winded knight maneuver and go knight f1 to g3 to f5?
Right.
A little switcheroo.
Well, and you made a very good point. One question is, what are you going to do with your knight on d2? But a deeper point is, what are you eventually going to do with your bishop on c1? You're going to want that guy in the game as well. Now, if you did, as you say, choose to play the move knight c4, then after a trade, you might actually see this bishop emerging on the long diagonal. Now that would make for a very interesting and powerful bishop that would be taking aim at black's king. Then I would really warm up to what Hikaru has done.
Now, that's something we see often in Maurice Lopez, and the reason for that is white usually has c3 hand.
Precisely.
So it's kind of an unusual bishop maneuver here for us, but I like the idea a lot.
But it would be very effective if
Yes.
he could bring that to fruition. So some things going on here. This could work out. Maurice, your thoughts?
Well, yes, I have to say that I agree with you 100%. And I also took a peek at the computer's ideas, because with these days computers see a lot of stuff and they're pretty strong. So I decided to just take a peek at what it thought about the position, and it didn't really like Aronian's move bishop to b7. It felt that putting the bishop on this diagonal was going in the wrong direction. Maybe a move like bishop to e6, or at least staying pat so you can control this long diagonal, putting the queen on c7 instead and playing slowly. You notice this square f5, this knight can always return to f5 whenever it likes, and with that control you're talking about with a move like knight to c4, it looks as though there's going to be a little bit of a lockdown on the position. And so Aronian's move, maybe the first move out of Nakamura's avoiding his preparation, might have been wrong and maybe landing him in a little bit of trouble, in a little bit of a positional bind. And we've seen Nakamura do this before. Come out of the opening with really nothing against Aronian. It's just some random position. He just avoided stuff and then very quickly outplay him positionally. And I think that Aronian has this memory in his head, and it looks as though he's set to work now, because Nakamura, with this solid play, may be getting an advantage. Back to you guys.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what's going to happen in this game. This could get really wild if, as you predict, that bishop gets on that long diagonal, leading to a lot of attacking possibilities. So
right, as we see on the analysis board, if he does get that, that would be great.
Yes, thanks, Maurice. And let's take another look at our Carlsen-Kamsky game. How's that going?
All right.
Last we looked.
Not too much, actually.
So Carlsen did make a move. He played rook on a to c1 instead of the rook on f to b1 move.
Right. So we had actually just, when we had left it, this rook was under attack by the bishop on b4. Gada had slid his rook over, and we had been talking about, okay, moving this rook to d1, this rook to c1, and eventually coming back with this knight so we could play f2, f3. Not anything earth-shattering, simply rook c1 and Gada to play. Now here, if I'm black, I do like this move f7, f5. It's not the only move by any stretch of the imagination. Another kind of quirky move that deserves some consideration is even a move like knight g5. Just simply saying to white, okay, are you interested in trading knights? If white says no and goes, say, for example, knight d2, then after, for example, f5, f3, knight f6, we see a situation here where what black is trying to do is keep the square e4 really, really well fortified, okay? But we'll go back to the position at hand, and this after rook c1, I'm expecting f5. Okay, I like this move best.
Very Kamsky-esque move too.
Oh yes. He at a certain moment, I think a lot of players have played the Dutch defense, and Gada had that in his repertoire when he was young. On the other hand, he played everything when he was young. And a move like f5, if we were again just to go down this line for a second, we have a position like this. We've seen these types of position in numerous Grandmaster games.
Yeah, and definitely we're going to see Carlsen go for something, but it doesn't look like as much as we would expect him to try to get in this game with White.
Well, also keep in mind that one of Magnus's great strengths is, as you say, he just grinds away. He's not about, having winning advantages out of the opening. He just wants a position that allows a lot of play, that he can continue, try to put problems, bring problems to his opponent. And if your opponent solves all the problems, well, power to you. You got a draw with black, and you go on to the next round. At the moment, I'm saying that I think Kamsky's position is ultra solid, and he's doing well. We'll just see how it continues.
Yes, and I agree with you that if it wasn't Carlsen who was White in this position, we might think, oh, Kamsky's equalized, he's going to have an easy time of a draw, but we know that this is the #1 player in the world, and
he's not going to give you an easy day.
He's going to come up with something.
That's right.
He will, and it's like, it's interesting to look and see what is it going to be. Maybe some of you guys watching around the world have some thoughts. Again, we invite you to tweet at us using the hashtag Sinquecup. SINQ Cup, or email questions at stlouischessclub.org. And with that, I'm going to take a little quick break, and we're going to be right back with more action from the Sinquefield Cup with Grandmasters Seirawan and Ashley.
All right, yeah.
Back to our coverage of the Sinquefield Cup here in St. Louis, round 1. I'm Jennifer Shahade. I'm here with Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan. We also have Grandmaster Maurice Ashley giving us some thrilling tactical highlights.
Absolutely.
And now today we've got Nakamura playing Aronian. Nakamura with the white pieces, as we mentioned earlier. He started the game with e4, and we like what he got out of it.
Right.
Although you did mention that earlier we were discussing this possibility of black breaking open the position with d5.
Right.
First glance, we didn't like it, but as it turns out, black had the tactical resources to go for it.
Exactly.
You want to take a look at that line?
For sure, because this was actually a crucial moment in the game. After this move f2, f3, which does slightly weaken the white king, my gut reaction was to give the move d6, d5 a try, and we had reached this position when we had come to a sudden stop. That is to say, after the move rook takes e5, we didn't look any further.
Shame on us. We always supposed to look at all the captures and checks before you stop analyzing, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I tell my students.
Absolutely.
So continue with the captures.
Calculate till the end. So after the move bishop takes b3, we do notice that the queen on d8 pins the knight on d2. We can't recapture with the knight because that would hang our queen. So we are forced to recapture the bishop on b3 with the pawn. But now that weakening move f3 comes back to bite us because black has this nice move, queen d4 check to white's king, and he picks up the rook on e5. So this line actually did work for black, and d6, d5 was the move that the computer recommended as an equalizing move. That white's advantage would have slipped after the move d5. That was not played by Levon. In fact, he played a move I really didn't give that much consideration to. He has dropped back with his knight to g6. Presumably, he looked at the same thing we looked at, and he thought that his knight might be a tactical target on e5, and that was why he dropped back with his knight to g6. Now, in this position, you had mentioned earlier that this knight on d2 blocks in this bishop on c1, so that knight on d2 has to go somewhere. In fact, white could play the very normal knight d2 f1 to g3 maneuver, which is so common in these lines of the Ruy-Lopez, and gives white a little bit more control over the square d5. I like Hikaru's position here. I think he does have a sizable opening advantage.
And now we have to see if Levon can come up with another way to play d5. Once you miss that opportunity, sometimes you don't get it back.
Precisely.
You were mentioning queen c7 and rook d8.
Earlier, instead
Yeah.
of knight g6.
Yes.
And instead of d5, yes. So we'll go back just to the point where Aronian did play the move knight g6. A very common idea had been queen c7 followed by rook d8 in order to get in this very important freeing break d5 and thereby equalizing and neutralizing the game. Aronian didn't go for that. He went for knight g6.
Now, knight g6, where do you think that what do you think that knight's doing there? I mean, it can't really go to f4 that easily, because f4 would promote the d5 push, but the problem is it's totally unanchored and loose there, right?
Exactly. It doesn't make a very good impression. For example, just to continue this line that we looked at a moment ago, in case white drops back with his knight in order to find a better square like the f5 square, and if black jumped, as you just mentioned, this knight on f4 has no protection. So that after a move like knight f5, this knight on f4 is suddenly in a discovered attack by the bishop on c1. This is simply a superb position now for white. I think that Hikaru would be dreaming about this. So this move knight g6...
It would just be a waste of time playing that knight on f4, so we're not going to see that.
Exactly.
Instead, it seems like he just dropped his knight back in order to make way for a potential d5 later.
It's kind of hard to slap lipstick on this one. I don't really understand this move very
Knight
much.
g6, you don't understand.
I don't get it. Also, if I were white in this particular position, of course, I'd start to be very ambitious as white. I would really like to play this move knight on d2 to c4. The knight is superb on c4. If I could combine that knight with the move a4, a5, so that I could bring this knight to b6, well, this is another way of controlling the d5 square. And I really like white's advantage. If I can get all of those moves in, I think that this would be a positionally dominant position. Strategically, from white's point of view, and Levon has to avoid this. And I really don't know what this knight on g6 is doing, and I don't know what this bishop on e7 is doing either.
Well, if you try knight c4 precisely now, how does d5 work?
Okay, let's go back. So,
yeah.
Right in this exact position.
I mean, I know it looks loose because our bishop on e7 is loose, and d5 there's a lot of discoveries, but
exactly,
we might not get them any more opportunities, so gotta give it a shot.
Exactly. So pawn takes, knight takes d5.
No, another potential. I mean, I don't think it works here because of d6, but one of the ideas of knight d6, you might be able to try knight f4 at some moment after d5 and try to recapture with the other knight, but here that would seem to just fail to the move d6.
Capture.
Actually trapping that bishop.
Trapping
right?
the bishop on e7.
So we've got to,
You've got to recapture right away. You can't allow that. I see what you're saying. So knight takes d5.
So
Knight takes d5. Bishop takes d5. More or less, all of these moves look very a flow, if I can say it like that. There's a flow. So then a move like bishop e3. And again, white's just for choice, because it seems to me these black pawns on the queen side are more of a target. Easier for white to attack those pawns on c5 and a6 than it is for black to attack the pawn on c2 and b2.
I can see it now. You're going to plug that ugly diagonal with queen d2 to f2, rook
Right.
d1, and have a party. Now, something really surprising has happened over on Karl Sinquefield. Let's take a look at that. A move that we did not expect.
Okay.
So Kamsky, instead of playing your move, your f5 move, he played h5, another way to expand on the king side, which does not look quite as harmonious. What do you make of this move?
I wouldn't have played it. I mean, I would not have played it. It doesn't mean that it's a bad move or anything like that. It's just a very surprising move. Normally, a move like h5 you're thinking as black that what you want to do is expand dramatically on the king side with g5 and g4, and I just don't think that black's position is so solid that that type of expansion is worth trying.
Or maybe
But
just nibbling with
h5,
h4 and h3. That's often an idea with playing that move. So that if you play h3 yourself, now f3 is not so palatable, and that was a move you were trying to play a lot.
Okay, so what we're saying that in case white were to start with the move h3 and you were to play the move h4, the moment this knight moves so that f2, f3 can boot that knight on e4, then the knight settles in very nicely to the g3 square. Understood. But boy, h5, I find that move to be highly committal.
Ugly looking a little, huh?
Ugly, just overly committal. In the immortal words of Victor Korchnoi, pawns do not move backwards. At some moment in the game, black might think, boy, it sure would be nice if I could move my pawn back from h5. So after a move like h5, let's see if white can do something. Well, let's just look at knight e1 anyway. It's going to be the type of move I want to play. I want to get rid of that knight. Now maybe with the knight back on the first rank, black can aspire for the move c5.
Looks so loose.
It sure does, doesn't it? Can I just take this guy? And in case of takes, now we understand why the rook was so well placed on c1. Magnus could just simply capture a pawn and be a happy camper. So c5, trying to break out, seems doesn't work at this moment.
So instead, black might just play a normal move. Of course, note now that the move f5 looks pretty unpalatable.
Right.
So let's
try
move
and
our queen.
Yeah, let's just toss the queen out over here just to see what the ramifications might be. Now, remember, our rooks are not protecting one another. So if we went for the expansion that we really want to do, f3, knight back, kicking that knight back and expanding, well, there's a hiccup to that plan. The rook would be hanging because the knight interferes with the rooks protecting one another.
And we're unlikely to see that variation occur in the board.
Yeah, absolutely. But in this kind of a position, it's clear that white is going to aspire one day to play the move e4. Maybe he would start by dropping his bishop into the d6 square and being able to play bishop f4. Again, I don't really see why h5 helps black's position.
And let's get Grandmaster Maurice Ashley's thoughts on this surprise move,
Big time,
h5.
h5.
You know, Yaz, you've always been known as the gentleman grandmaster. So you're polite, you're kind to these moves, you don't want to disrespect your colleagues. But I got to tell you, I'm from Brooklyn, and when we see moves that we don't like, we say it. And the move h5, come on, what kind of move is this? We would not have expected this from Gada. He's playing so solidly, he's playing so strong, and then he makes a move like h5, very loose, looks totally lacking in harmony in the position, just like throwing your pinky out there for somebody to chop it off. And so I'm really not happy with this move, and it looks as though Carlsen was really pleased to see the move. He was super calm in the moment. You see, he's always cool anyway, but he must be thinking, good, do some more stuff, do some damage to your position. And his response was pretty quick. He played the move knight to e5 in response to this move. So he looks like he's not worried about it at all. He's going to centralize his knight onto the e5 square, and if you want to trade off, no problem. Your pawn on h5 is going to be looking funny, and I'm still looking to play the move f3. So h5 looks like not a great moment for Kamsky, and simple moves by Carlsen will probably start to lead to something positive for him. Of course, it doesn't mean that he's going to die right now, but it's just the kind of move that Kamsky needed because he wasn't generating any energy himself, and I think he's happy to see this move. Jen and Yaz?
Totally agreed. I mean, it seems that this is what Carlsen needed to make the position more exciting.
Right, and for himself.
So Gada's obliged instead of you move f5, and I will wonder why Kamsky rejected that idea.
Well, let's go back just for a moment and look at the move f5 and why f5 might have been a superior choice. In this case, after the move f5, knight e5, knight takes e5. After this trade, first of all, the move f3 really doesn't bother us. The knight could come back here. But, for example, black has this capture on c4, and in case of a recapture with the queen, then putting the queen powerfully on d5. I think this is a very easy way for Gada to neutralize the position and make clear equality. However, if we take this pawn on f5, move it back 2 squares, and put the pawn on h5, then it's a whole different ball game. Let's see what happens now. After the move h5, pardon me.
You don't want to make the move so badly.
Yeah.
Your mouse isn't even letting you
I
do
know.
it.
Rook c1, h5. Now let's see what the difference is. After knight e5, in case of a trade, now we see you can't capture the pawn on e4 because the knight on e4 is left unprotected. So you cannot do that. You can't go for the variation that was going to equalize. Now in this position, if you do something really bad, like play a move like queen g5, you've taken away the retreat square for the knight, so that after f3, the knight's left trapped, simply trapped in the middle of the board. Also, if we go back just one move, notice how this pawn on e5 now controls these 2 natural retreat squares of the knight. The knight essentially is getting trapped in the middle of the board. And this is something that Gada has got, he's very, very aware that he's got to avoid this line of play. And I'm just looking at Gada's pose at the board. I've played Gada so many times. This is a serious pose. He is not happy with his position.
Now we do have a big development in our Nakamura-Aronian game. Aronian has played the free move d5.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Nakamura's position, as you pointed out earlier, set up well to increase his advantage even despite that.
All right, we'll go to that board in just a moment. We did have knight e5. Gada did play the move queen c7, and now the question is, can Magnus increase his advantage or not? Shall we switch boards to...
Let's take a look at this move queen c7 and see the ramifications of that. So now, of course, so we're still at Carlsen-Kamsky, and rook c1, eyeing the queen on c7, and not normally what we want, but on the other hand, making a direct threat on e5.
Exactly.
And inviting Carlsen to play something like f4.
Right.
Which I don't think he wants to play.
I don't either.
He wanted to play f3, so once you play f4, you can't play f3, as you pointed out earlier.
So let's suggest that Magnus does play the move f2, f3, attacking the knight. I think that what Gata has in mind is that with his queen on c7, he wants to drop his knight back to the d6 square to put a little bit of pressure on this pawn on c4. That is the only thing that makes sense for queen c7, knight d6. How that works with h5, however, is something I can't answer because I don't see the harmony of the move h5 and queen c7 and knight d6.
So you don't think he's trying to play knight takes e5, knight g5, and knight h7?
No.
And go for that like beautiful outpost on h7?
No.
Because that makes sense, right? There
well, we go. Yeah, then he would have uncovered the h7 square.
So if knight takes e5, we do have that little in-between move, but to what does it lead us?
And so what Jen was saying is that what White has done is put this knight in purgatory by just driving it all the way out of the center. But then the move h5 is useful because you've given your knight the h7 outpost.
Outpost. I think we need a different word. We said outhouse.
Right. More likely, yes. It's in a hospital over there.
But there is one glimmer of happiness in this position. Bishop d6, not possible really because of queen takes a5. So instead, it would seem like White would be compelled to defend e5, perhaps with f4 or something like that.
Right. Right. And then he does have a space edge after that. There's no question that White is for choice thanks to his space advantage. Yeah.
But looking terribly awkward for black. I would say that's the word. It's not looking harmonious like some of your ideas.
Right.
So speaking of awkward, let's take a look at Nakamura Aronian, because I think white also has an edge in that game.
All right. Yes. And Aronian did go for. Whoops. Yes, he did go for that d5 break. Let's take it back a move or two. So when we have left the game, we have left it exactly in this position with the move knight g6 being, whoops, I went too fast there. Sorry about that, folks. We're just going to take a few moves back. We had left it in this position, and we were looking at two moves. We definitely wanted white, Hikaru, to move his knight on d2. One very attractive square was f1, with the idea of coming out here to g3 and eventually f5, as well as knight c4. I keep going too fast, I apologize. So knight c4 was Hikaru's choice. He played knight c4.
Before things got uglier, Aronian decided to take his claim in the center and play d5,
right,
releasing his bishop on e7, but not solving all of his problems.
Right. Just giving his bishop at e7 a little bit more space and trying to get rid of this d6 pawn weakness before Hikaru could clamp down and really put too much pressure on that. And then we did see the move. Oops, I can't.
So after knight takes d5, you were looking, I think, at knight takes d5, but instead Nakamura played knight to f5,
right,
keeping more pieces on the board. Because you thought that also after knight d5, bishop e3, white had an edge as well.
That's right. That was much more of a simpler edge, that trade of knights. But the way Hikaru did it also, I'm very much attracted to it.
Keeping more pieces on the board in a position where you got kind of a lot of natural advantages. And obviously the knight on f5 is still just a beautiful piece.
Well, without question. And we are, as we know, in open positions, the two bishops are a sizable advantage. And with this move knight f5, tactics by this rook on e1 can come into play big time.
Oh, right. Things like knight takes e7 followed by bishop g5 and overloaded on d5.
Right.
So.
And toss in an opportunity like a5 and knight b6 one day, and suddenly this could be over in a hurry. So black has to come up with counterplay of his own. I was eyeballing the move bishop f6. After all, the bishop on f6 does put pressure on the pawn on
knight
b2.
d6,
this move knight d6 was the thing that is the drawback. After the move knight d6 is very attractive for white, we're attacking the bishop on b7 as well as the knight on d5. And that's why the knight on c4 is so very powerful as well. So bishop f6 probably cannot be played. And if we go back, I think if I'm black in this position, I'd probably rein in my horns a bit and just play a move like rook e8, hoping that one day that this rook will be able to neutralize this rook on e1.
And now your move a5 carries an additional idea of bishop to a4. Just which would right now would force the rook back to f8. Quite annoying. Of course, black could maybe play something like bishop c6 to stop that.
Right. It's just a kind of a preparatory. And I like that move bishop c6 too, by the way, Jen. We've seen in one instance that the bishop was a potential target on the square b7. Now on bishop on c6, you kind of remove yourself from that kind of a threat. And you are, once again, threatening either bishop f6, activating the bishop, or bishop f8, safe and steady as she goes.
My question is, how do we get that bishop on c1 into the game?
Right.
We need that.
Right. You touched on it right then. Correct. Maurice, maybe you have some thoughts that you'd like to share about this particular position, because it is wide open and there may be good possibilities.
I thought you were going to say, and you're from Brooklyn and you like wide open positions. Well, the thing is, yes, I really like what's happening for Nakamura right now. So I decided to check out the computer's opinion of this to see if it jived with mine, and it said pretty much it likes white's game. The freedom in the position for white, the great squares for the pieces, but it wants to get real concrete. In this position, it just wants to play knight takes on e7. So if it can make this exchange right here, actually the move queen c7 was played, I believe. So let's get updated on that. So this move was played, and this move, knight takes e7, getting the two bishops for himself. And that bishop you were asking about, how does it get into the game? Well, just like this, a lot of pressure on the position. You see this other bishop holding steady in weight, and white just has a free game. The queen will be able to go to e2, the other rook will come into the game, and this bishop will be annoying for the rest of the game. This pawn on c5 will be a weakness, and it just seems as though white has a positional edge. Not quite winning, of course, you can look at it and see that's not the case, but saying that it's substantial, something for white to play for, to infinitely pressure black's position. So the pawn structure really works in white's favor, as well as the two bishop advantage. And I'd like to go back, Yas, because I was curious about a position just a bit earlier. So if I may go back a few moves, the moment we were discussing this move d5, actually it was one more move here, when the knight was still on e5. Yes, when he played the move knight to g6. So right here, and we were talking about this, and you mentioned that tactical opportunity. So I checked it with the computer also, and this move d5 could have been played. We were talking about this taking, and after knight takes, and bishop takes d5, and rook takes e5 with tactics in the position. Well, check this out. After the move bishop to b3, which you pointed out earlier with all those nice ideas, the computer came up with rook takes e7. Forget about your check winning my rook. I'm going to sacrifice it. And after queen takes, pawn takes here on b3, getting ready to move the knight out the way and develop the bishop and have two pieces for a rook, which we know is a substantial advantage. So it looks like d5 then couldn't have been played without going into deficit mode for black. And it just seems as though white always has an edge in all the lines, including the one we see on the board right now. Back to you guys.
Wow, that's an interesting final position. I wonder
Crucial.
about queen e3 and rook e8.
Right.
Rook's moving to the center. It's not totally clear, but yeah, if white could
consolidate the two pieces.
So thanks, Maurice. This is quite a game and lots of variations. It'll be exciting to see what the players have to say about the game. We're going to be getting them in later, so you definitely want to stay tuned for that.
Absolutely. Our intention, just to let you all know, is after the game. In principle, if there's a victory in the game, the victor will certainly come down and share their thoughts. But we do hope to have interviews with all four players.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
That is the plan.
Okay.
Speaking of plans, we did get an interesting tweet at our hashtag SinQcup.
Yes.
Not SinQcup, SINQ Cup. So there you go. And it was actually from Grandmaster Nigel Short, who called the move h5 a little bit abstract.
A little bit abstract.
Kinder than Maurice's Brooklyn description.
And yeah. But Nigel, as we know, fantastic Grandmaster challenger to the world champion Garry Kasparov, following the game's life. Hi, shout out to Nigel. Glad you could join us. And Nigel, is a Dutch player and has been for many years. And I'm sure that move h5 really took Nigel by surprise, as it did me. Back to the position of Nakamura and Aronian for a moment. And as Maurice was pointing out, this move knight takes e7. I don't like giving up this beautifully placed knight for that bishop. But on the other hand, as you pointed out, how else to solve this bishop on c1? So after knight takes e7, bishop g5. This was the position that Maurice had shown us that the computer generated suggestion. And I'm supposing a move like knight f5, at least to try to angle for the d4 square. I prefer white, no question about it. I think the two bishops are a sizable advantage for white, but I didn't really see how else black was to play after bishop g5. If he doesn't play knight f5, I think he could get himself tied up pretty badly.
Yeah, and then you just like the move queen d3, hitting on f5, huh? But then the knight, how's the knight coming to d4?
All right, so let's see. So the move I was thinking
Because
about
it looks
was
like you're
bishop
trying to
g5.
play knight f5 in order to play knight to d4, right?
Precisely. So after queen d3, attacking the knight on f5, I wanted to play knight d4, trying to neutralize this bishop over here.
Yeah, very great piece. That's
that's the Ruy Lopez bishop, what Bobby Fischer used to refer to as the Spanish torture.
Right.
The bishop on b3 is really, really strong, and so that's the type of position that I would expect to show up after knight takes e7 and bishop g5. If I could go back for just a moment.
Yeah, I want to stop knight d4 somehow. I don't like letting you get that in.
Well,
I feel that we want to stop that.
Okay, but
how is the question? I mean,
right.
rook e5 doesn't really seem to lead to much. Knight d4, and I don't really see any tactical opportunities there.
And just be a little careful.
Well, yeah, now I'm leaving tactical opportunities for you.
Right.
That's not exactly.
That wasn't the intention.
No,
I understand.
No.
You're a very generous person, but you like your pieces as well.
Yeah, so that doesn't lead to much, and so maybe. But here, queen d3 just allowing knight d4, that doesn't leave a great taste in my mouth either.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's see how that goes. So after knight d5, knight f5, we're kind of facing a bit of a problem. What are we going to do about that jump knight d4?
Knight? So if we play, let's see, what if we play knight e5 here?
And how does that really?
That doesn't really stop knight d4. I'm just looking at the bishop takes d5 and c3 maybe. There's still a lot of tactics though, because you have bishop b3 here.
Right. Be careful. You may force my knight to move, but you may not like where it ends up. I don't know about this one. This one just doesn't feel right somehow. Let's go back a move or two.
So after knight e5.
Yes.
Instead of knight d4, yeah? Yeah, so instead of knight e5, it looks like maybe we should have thought about something else.
Uh-huh. So we're anticipating bishop g5, knight here.
Uh-huh, and then a5 in this position? Or knight to a5. Knight to a5, yeah.
That's
knight
a
a5 with the idea that we're just hitting on b7 and d5. And so, okay, what happens if queen takes a5?
Right.
Then just after this trade, your rook's getting into such a nice square, and your queen rather is getting into such a nice square.
Well, in this specific position, it's very critical that our bishop defends the d8 square, so black doesn't get the opportunity to slide his rook over and pin our bishop to our queen.
We could still try it, but...
Well, now we've got either we could take this bishop or
rook e5.
Rook e5, and that looks like a winner.
Yeah, because f6 is not allowed.
Right, and this knight is hanging too, and the rook is just in time to support our bishop.
If we play c4 here, you have a lot of different good options.
Including bishop takes f7, right.
Yeah,
and Hikaru has captured. He has gone for the money. Oops, I went too far. I apologize.
Too far is in the beginning of the game.
Yes, he did make that move, knight takes e7. Oops, I'm missing the move for black. What did black do after knight f5? He went queen c7. I apologize. Knight e7, and Hikaru has played that. We're anticipating knight on g6 takes e7, and this is, again, this is the kind of concrete play that we talked about at the start of the opening, how e4 variations tend to be very clear, tactical, rather straightforward. And Hikaru's got that position.
Well, let's look at knight f5 again and take a look at after knight a5, fabulous move, queen takes a5. How's this position if we just play bishop takes d5, just recapturing? Of course, this queen is now in a monstrous square, but still, let's take a look. What if we now try our move knight d4?
Right, so knight d4.
What do you have in store here? Because the c2 pawn is at least attacked.
Yeah,
I mean,
one of the things I'd really be fearful of is a move where bishop f6 could jump out. So we'll start with a move like rook e4.
Now the problem is if we gobble on c2, rook c1 is
That's a nice tempo.
It's pretty much crushing us because we can't even move our knight back to d4 because the rook just snatches it.
Exactly.
So that would just lose taking on c2.
Yeah, taking advantage of this pin over on the queen. Now let's go back a few moves, because the move I thought we were going to play here in this position after bishop takes d5, pardon me, was c4. I thought we were going to play c4. So what's the idea of c4? Notice once again that the move f3 has weakened white's king's position, so that if we do capture the bishop, we have a check, and we get the opportunity to recapture the bishop on b7. King h1, queen takes b7. Now, how good or how bad this position is, I'm still not sure.
Yeah, and what if we try sneaking in rook e5 now?
Okay.
Just trying to hit the knight so that we can follow it up with a rook e7 type move.
I see.
If you play f6, it looks like we can just take on f5 and then take on g5 and
your
then
pawn
up
up.
a pawn, yeah.
End up a pawn.
So if the knight now doesn't seem to have a lot of great squares, and again the bishop crucial tempo, not allowed to play rook to d8, right?
Right, exactly.
So you kind of want to play f6 and rook d8 simultaneously, and you can't do that.
Right.
So here, that knight needs an anchor.
Right.
It really does.
And
And
the
the position would be fine if black could just put that knight somewhere.
Right. The problem also is if we're induced to play a move like g6, well, we're really making a lot of dark square weaknesses on the king side, which is just ideal for the dark squared bishop, white's dark squared.
Absolutely. I mean, that move makes you sadder than h5.
It does.
I know. When you have to play g6, you're shedding tears.
Yes. So let's go back, because we're not satisfied with the outcome of this particular sequence. Perhaps black is going to need a better move than the move knight f5. Let's toss in a move I'm not particularly happy about playing. I'm kind of holding my nose while suggesting a move like rook to d8 in any case.
You don't want to pin yourself, huh?
I don't like walking into pins.
But you've got some discovered attacks of your own, right? So that queen on d1 is now getting eyed by the rook on d8. So.
Correct. That's what I'm hoping, that I'll be able to bail out with some opportunities for attacks. Now, what Maurice mentioned was that the computer suggestion was he's going to play queen e2, slide his rook over to d1, and just say, listen, I've got the two bishops, I've got a long-term advantage, what more do I need? You're suffering. And I think that's basically the case. Black is just going to be suffering. Queen
right.
e2.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice little threats, and again, so you want to play f6 here?
I don't want to play
I thought you were going to play rook e8, but then you have to deal with e5 as well.
Yeah, I don't want to play this move, but I'm hoping that I'll have enough time to vacate this diagonal. It's still looking to me, at least, like black's position is very under a lot of pressure, very unpleasant.
Yeah, it just looks extremely dangerous.
Yeah, don't want to go for that. But again, this bishop g5, I have missed the move knight a5. I thought that this knight is so very nice on c4. This move optically wasn't on my radar, so to speak. But this move knight a5, it really does look as if the resulting positions are very promising for Hikaru. White's position is just excellent.
Too powerful. And we can't stick knight d4 in right away, can we? Because then you just have a...
Bishop takes b7.
No,
right?
Earlier.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Let's see. Sorry.
Then you can take on b7, and I think you're going to be winning some material there as well.
So
if you play knight a5 here, and let's say we try to play knight d4 first, and kind of my goal is to be able to take on b3 at the right moment.
Yep.
But the problem is, I think here, if you stick knight b7 in immediately, now after knight b3,
I don't capture back, but maybe this one?
Yeah, I'm looking at queen takes d5 here. That looks pretty powerful.
And even, so this is two pieces for a rook, but unfortunately for black, this knight is actually menacing the c5 pawn as well. So this is excellent, simply excellent for white.
And if we recaptured on b7 instead,
okay,
after you play... If you just play queen takes b7 here, well then it seems like you're getting into some issues with just a simple capture in c3, right? Well, then g5 is hanging.
Exactly.
So maybe we have to stick in bishop e7 and then c3. Maybe bishop e7 first.
This one is, as you're
'Cause I don't
pointing
like
out,
that.
you don't want to lose your bishop. So you
Um,
were suggesting instead of advancing the pawn,
Try
first,
that little in-between move.
and you're attacking the rook. You force the rook to move.
c3.
c3. We took us, takes, and we get here. Now this looks like white is emerging upon a head. Is that true, though? Let me just
So
double check.
you're going to play queen b7.
Or d7. I'm not really too sure. So the idea of d7 is I've got this little trick of knight c2. I'm hoping you will fall for this capture so that I could take, but
even there, I
even
have
there you've got
queen e4, right?
You are so right, Jen.
Yeah.
Even here you have I was hoping a moment ago that this knight on c2 was going to win material by forking queen and rook, but this move queen e4 not only gets out of the danger of the knight, but it attacks the rook, and looky, it also attacks the knight. So that's a monster move, queen e4. That is excellent.
So yeah, I'm just trying to look at everything for black, looking at all these forcing variations, because if black can make some massive trades, that would obviously be a boon for his position, because otherwise he's got some issues.
Without question. And Maurice has some insights for us to share.
Well, this kind of position, certainly looks like it's in Nakamura's favor. You know, it's easy for us. We get to analyze on the board. We get to move pieces around. These players have to see all this in their heads and judge everything from the position that's sitting in front of them. So it's very difficult, even when we are making these mistakes, right? They're doing the same thing in their minds and going, oops, oh, wait a minute, I can't do that. And then the nervous tension builds because the clock is ticking and the world is watching. So you never want to be on the defensive in this type of position, although, of course, these guys have been trained to deal with this sort of pressure. So Aronian has to watch out. There's so many lines that lead to his demise, so he's going to have to be super careful. In the other game, we see that the game is kind of tepid. It's really not any real action going on just yet. The kind of position that Carlsen seems to have decided to play because, for one, he knows about this guy, about Kamsky. He knows he hasn't had a great record against him. But also, let's make the point, he's playing a world championship match in a few months. In a couple of months, actually, and he doesn't want to give the beast in India any nuances, opening secrets. So you see him playing very solidly, a very tepid opening, kind of boring position, so that Anand doesn't say, aha, so that's what you've got prepared for me. So we got to watch what he does in this tournament to see if he's going to show his hand or save the juicy stuff for his World Championship match later in the year. Back to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Maurice. I think Magnus Carlsen's got a couple of months to squeeze some fresh juice, don't you think?
Right, fresh ideas.
Yeah, so that World Championship match, of course, is in November, and by all accounts, Magnus Carlsen is a slight favorite.
Yes.
How big of a favorite is the question? Your thoughts?
Right. Well, actually, I think that Vichy has been a fantastic world champion. And his match play, especially his match play against Kramnik, that was just absolutely brilliant preparation. I am not discounting the Tiger from Madras as opposed to the Beast. I think that it's going to be a very, very hard-fought match, and I don't see Magnus as the big favorite that the rating gives him. By rating alone, Magnus is something even close to a 75% favorite in that match. But I don't see it that way. I see a very, very close, hard-fought match, and it will really, in my opinion, come down to the player with the better nerves. As the tension in the match just keeps ratcheting up ever higher, I think it's a pick-em.
Oh, do you?
Yeah,
right.
I really do. I really
think
do.
You have a lot of people who are going to bet with you.
Yeah, I know Magnus has got a lot of fans, including myself, but I've been around a long time, and Vichy is a chess genius. Just no other way of putting it.
No doubt about that. And playing on his home turf with it, which some people think is an edge, some people think is a disadvantage.
I'm one of those in the disadvantage categories. I think that playing the match in Chennai in India, the home city of Anand, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Anand to give interviews and to signatures and fans and all of the hoopla, whereas I think the Norwegian, Magnus, can kind of come in and say, okay, Vichy, you go ahead and deal with the press. I'll go back and just prepare and relax. And I think there's going to be more pressure on Anand for that reason.
Oh, absolutely. Although Magnus has fans all over the world, even some people rooting for him in India, no doubt. So we're here at the beautiful chess club and classic center in St. Louis. We actually have some shots. This gorgeous neighborhood, the Central West End. It's always a pleasure for people to come out here and visit. You've got all the coffee shops, boutiques, and we've got live commentary teams here as well. So we're here in the we're here sequestered in the basement so that the players can't hear us upstairs.
Right.
But we've also got people playing over at the World Chess Hall of Fame. I mean, rather commenting at the World Chess Hall of Fame.
Three commentary teams.
The sports bar next door.
At Leicester's, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we've got 3 commentary teams. Lots of grandmasters all around us now, including Ben Feingold, Ian Rogers.
All the way from Australia.
Ronan,
fantastic chess journalist, Ian Rogers.
Right, Ronan, Kobian. And just on top of that, too, from Webster University, our reserve player, had something gone wrong with the travels or illnesses of any of the players, we had Lim Quang, I got his name wrong, from Vietnam, who goes to Webster. And if he couldn't play, we had Wesley So, 2 2,700 rated players, one from the Philippines, one from Vietnam, that were ready to man the breach in case.
So many strong players here in St. Louis converging. This great city now, the center of chess in America. We've got the St. Louis Chess Club, the World Chess Hall of Fame. We have Webster University, Lindenwood also attracting a lot of strong players. So it's just a sight to be seen. If you haven't come out yet, I know a lot of people made a special trip just for this. There's still time to make those arrangements. Come on out and join us here in person in St. Louis. Now, Carlsen and Gadakamsky added in this game. Do we have any developments there?
Well, just before we leave our game between Hikaru and Levon, Hikaru has played the line of play that we've been expecting. He captured on e7. There was the recapture. He plays bishop to g5. And we've been trying to keep Levon's position together, but he's under a lot of pressure. I think that this is just a very comfortable long-term advantage for White, and I do like Hikaru's position. Let us go back to the world's #1 player. The game. Oh, I must close the screen. I have to remember to close my screens, my windows. And we have tepid or quiet position, if you will. Last move by Gadakamsky. How did we get here? When we left it, we were around these parts. Knight e5 had been played. Queen c7. Knight takes d7. Wow. Trading that pair of knights. I can see reasons why both players might have been pleased with that particular trade. In White's case, the trade of knights has meant that he will be able to play f2, f3, and force the black knight out of the center. Queen e2 was played, trying to pick up a tempo